Most of the record. Right. Then. So after they then. Be. Solid. Up to the part that.
Peter, may I interrupt?
Sure.
Just want to let everybody know that people who are on Zoom have a hard time hearing. So everybody has to speak up, and you cannot sit in front of that owl. Here we go. Because you're interfering with them pairing each other, looking at each other,
Oh,
and a camera.
wait, we have a better response. Who? How's that?
Speak. If one person would speak at a time and loudly, so everybody can hear you. That'll work better.
So, you made the presentation? Sure, right, great, thanks.
We also have a microphone.
Bring it out.
Good.
Well, setting up, I think everybody can probably hear me. I just want for the
Yeah.
record note that the legal notice was posted in the Daily Hampshire Gazette on January 4th, on February 4. All of the abutters were notified by certified mail and the buying challenge by regular mail. Notices were posted at the town offices and at the town hall and on the town website. Didn't know we had one case.
Touch that button. That's Bluetooth to there. It's then has been done.
Sounds great. You can all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Great. I'll get started then. My name's Mirko Adizio. I'm representing Fort Brook, the project Blue Wave's proposing, my employer, solar project here in Plainfield off the street. Just, as I get started, we'll do a presentation about Blue Wave briefly. So Blue Wave's been around for 15 years, founded in Boston. So it's a Massachusetts company. They focused on, renewable energy projects and expanding access to solar energy. The company focuses on distribution generation. So that's the types of projects we're proposing here, which tie into the local distribution grid. Typically they're less than five megawatts and less. Most of the projects we've worked on have been through the SMART program, which is also the one being proposed tonight, which is regulated through the Massachusetts Department of DOER Energy Resources. So I'll get a little bit of detail of the actual site itself. So here we have a 6 megawatt DC solar project with an ancillary battery system proposed. The project is on a parcel of about 70 acres. The actual limit of work is 26 acres, including about 23 acres of clearing. The system, as we're proposing, it's actually going to be a tracker system and conventional, meaning that the drip edge of the panel is going to be about 4 feet at its lowest. And they're going to track the sun. So they're going to be laid out north-south facing east-west and move with the sun very slowly as the sun moves. I'm sure I have the next. And yeah, there's the final piece related to the actual site, the project itself. We're planning to enroll in the SMART program. These projects can typically go through what's called the community solar structure, which can provide folks who enroll, who are part of that territory to get a discount on their bill. So that's typically how these projects have been working through the SMART program and regulated for DOER. I'll pass to my colleague here, Melinda from Weston Sampson, to go through the specifics of the site design.
Thank you, Marco. Melinda Costello with Weston and Sampson, civil engineer working on the project. So just some additional detail on the project. Marco mentioned that the total limit of work is just over 26 acres. The entire limit of work will be surrounded by a 7-foot tall farm fence. It will be a wooden post with like a wire mesh fabric, and it will be 7 feet tall to comply with National Electric Code. There's some existing residential structures in the northwest portion of the parcel, and then the rest of it is undeveloped woodland. There are some streams and wetlands on the property, but we are staying outside of all jurisdictional resource areas as well as buffer zones associated with the project, associated with the site. There will be a 20-foot wide, approximately 350-foot long gravel access drive that will be connected to East Street and go up to the proposed equipment pad area. The access drive will be designed in a way that it will support the turnaround for an aerial lift fire truck. Associated with the site are 4 stormwater basins. 2 of them will be infiltration. The other 2 will be detention basins, and those are included with the site to support the stormwater design, balancing the pre and post development peak discharge runoff rates associated with the project. The property setback lines are 75 feet on the side and the rear yard and 50 feet on the front. We did do geotechnical test pits in September for the site, and those were done throughout the interior of the site as well as the proposed stormwater basins. And there's about just over 23 acres of tree clearing associated with the project as well. Those are the very high levels of the details, and then if the others have questions, I'm happy to go into any additional detail if we were planning board members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Want to start? Sure.
I heard you just mention the 75-foot setback, the original drawing only had a 50-foot setback all the way around the site now. We at the time didn't have any residents around. Those are new piece of information. Also, we need to look at perhaps any additional setbacks if anybody's too close to the property. See what it would be not beneficial for them to live with just the 75 feet. So let's look at that. Is the 7-foot fence adequate screening for guests?
So the 7-foot tall fence is more for the National Electric Code to comply with the electrical standards. In terms of screening for the project, even though we are proposing just over 23 acres of tree clearing, there is adequate screening around the entire property from where our new proposed tree clearing limits will be and existing vegetation beyond. At the last meeting we talked about providing some sightline drawings in the supplemental information packages that I shared with you tonight. In Appendix C, I believe, I have 4 or 5 figures in there that go around to the nearest abutters and provide some sight lines to show what the sight line would be with existing vegetation from the nearest structure on that abutting property to where the proposed tree line would be, which shows that there would be adequate vegetation at all of those abutting.
We need to talk about the perimeter access for staging fire containment operations. So I think Peter, you wanted to address that issue. Talk about that.
Yeah, okay. So we haven't heard as yet from the chief, but based upon our previous application, his preference is to circumnavigate the fence on the outside rather than inside. And so we might be looking at moving the fence closer to the panels to facilitate that. And then testing that we can actually get the fire apparatus around the perimeter of the site. So that will do something we'll want to verify. I am concerned about the screening with respect to the best unit. So what I'd like to do is let Jared finish. Then I'd like for you to walk us through the drainage design and get the best area to pick.
I kind of question whether there shouldn't be a gate on the street. You kind of leaving access right up to the base for best to anybody that can the site. I was wondering if you know.
Yeah, I can address that. There's two, I'm gonna walk over to the plans and kind of show you where, but there's two gates associated with the, and fence lines associated with the, project. But they, so C103 is the sheet that I'm on right now, and it's a zoomed in, view of East Street. We're kind of at the very end of East Street. The fence line is down. There's two different fence lines. There's one down by the array, and there'll be an access gate to get into the array area. You see the proposed gravel road and a large gravel turnaround area for the fire truck. That's all open. There's a separate fence line for where the equipment pad area will be, and within that area, that's where your transformers, inverters, your battery storage unit will be. And there's a separate gate for entry into that. Both gates will be equipped with a Knox box for fire department entry. But other than that, the fences will be 7 feet tall and they won't be accessed to the public or even the residential property owner of the parcel. It will only be accessed by Blue Wave workers or the project workers and the fire department, and it will be secured otherwise. So like coming in, like if someone was curious and came down at the end of East Street and needed somewhere to turn around, it's not that they would be kind of locked out onto East Street. There's room to come into the site, turn around and leave without needing to get entry into the fence.
Isn't there another fence around the detention pond?
Yes, we have, just for safety reasons, we have a small fence proposed around the perimeter of the of this basin, stormwater basin 4, and I got another gate for entry for maintenance there.
And is that also the separate fire?
Yes.
Fire protection, fire suppression system listed as aerosol and water.
I didn't hear you, say that again? Say that one more time.
The fire suppression system listed as aerosol and water. When we get in water, how much was it?
Is that from the battery spec?
Yes.
So it's 30 year. Yeah, the battery spec we submitted, sometimes they can have reserved water that's used in the event of some sort of need to dissipate. Same thing with like other forms of fire suppression or like air conditioning or filtering for air to come in from the exterior. So those are just different fire suppression and management uses that they have on the batteries, but we haven't finalized the battery selection, so that's just the battery spec that's submitted.
At our previous projects, we had a lot of concern over the noise and particularly the acoustic mitigation for the best. On one of our recent projects, had a 20-some foot wall around it, acoustic wall. And how are you looking to deal with the noise from the best system?
So we did, as part of the supplemental package that you have in front of you tonight, I believe Appendix B, we did do a sound analysis at the site. So we went out to the site and took some ambient noise readings. Let me just grab my binder to get these values. So we did ambient levels at the nearest property line for where the equipment pad will be. So again, kind of at this along this portion of East Street, right, kind of where it terminates at the end of the parcel, at East Street. And the ambient readings on average were around, 34 and a half, 34 decibels. And then what we did was we did some sound pressure calculations. And there's two proposed, battery storage units, 2 proposed transformers, and 30 inverters that will be within that equipment pad area. So we did some sound pressure calculations, and the total of all of the equipment that we have spec'd out as part of the application will have noise at around 90 decibels. And then that 90 decibels dissipates exponentially as you leave at a certain distance. So we took those distances and we calculated an approximate noise level reading at the north, east, south, and west property lines, given their respective distances. And then we also added in a factor of safety of an increase of 5 additional decibels, just for a factor of safety, because they are just theoretical calculations, so it just provides some additional buffer. So at the equipment pad, it was 90. The nearest property line, obviously, is the northern property line right at East Street. With a 5 decibel factor of safety, we're approximating a noise reading of 41 decibels, which is within the 10 decibel threshold that Mass DEP policy has for an increase based on noise levels. Just for reference, the table will summarize the other 3 property lines. The east was approximately 24 decibels, south was 30, and the west was 27 decibels. Again, all with that factor of safety of 5 decibels added to it.
I noticed that some of the end documents that they talk about operator and project owner. Can you explain those 2 items?
Yeah, in this case, Blue Wave would operate as the current operator. The case that you're describing.
Is it, but it's an LLC, is it the same? Is there an L?
Yeah, Blue Wave is the developer that, the LLC is the project itself.
Each
It's
project,
owned wholly by Blue Wave to operate it.
can I just jump in for this clarification? So, each project that's due, does that have its own LLC?
Yes.
And why is that?
It's mostly a tax. You could look at it as tax and then corporate structure. That's the reason why, so Blue Wave can hold multiple different projects that you have. You go through the permits that are held to one project, the real estate agreements that are held to one project, that's all held in one LLC that acts as basically like its own corporation, and then that's just held like any other corporation that can be purchased by another corporation. We all know that it's the same kind of thing. In this case, we've been the holder since the beginning. So the real estate agreements, permits, all the equipment, construction would all be held under that LLC.
In your initial submission, you didn't indicate how you're supporting these panels. Solar panels.
Sure, yeah, these will be on steel beams. They're typically ground screws for this type of soil that we, made aware from the geotechnical that we did. Sometimes these can be I-beams that are pile driven, but in this case, I believe they'll be steel racking ground screws.
Thank you. Let's see. You've answered a lot of my questions so far. Can you walk us through the drainage design, because I see that there are basically 2 large drainage structures on the property and some drainage swales that connect them. And I know that design calculations are based on the 100-year storm level and at our 100-year storm level now are 10-year storms here in Plainfield. So, if you have the before and after development, drawing in your set that shows it's a color drawing that sort of shows, that would be a really great visual.
Can I borrow?
Yeah.
The ones that are there?
So this is gonna, I think, help everybody sort of see what the scope of this project is a little better. So the first drawing is a color rendition of what is existing. And then, and we can see that there's the area of the house, the light shaded areas are currently open areas. The rest is wooded, and I believe the shaded areas are lockout properties, is that right?
The gray?
Yeah. So let's look at what happens when the array arrives.
Can I just add one more clarification?
Sure.
And then the blue lines, the thick blue lines that you see are kind of the delineation of the different ways that the water would flow. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different areas where water kind of sheds off this property.
Thank
So like I mentioned, there was those 4 different areas that kind of shed, and in this map, you saw that both the site was this green shading. And with the 23 acres of tree clearing that we're proposing, that's what you're seeing here in this color. And what will be proposed as tree clearing, the ground cover under post development conditions will be a meadow grass cover. Won't be like a soccer field grass, really cut really short. Mowing will be done 2 to 3 times a year, so the grass will be a lot higher. And that will provide more grass thickness and more height to slow down some of the stormwater. But within the site, just based on the different directions of where stormwater is, and because there is tree clearing, that runoff number does increase. We're not denying that. So because we do have this increase in stormwater runoff without any stormwater management system, we are proposing 4 basins throughout the site to help mitigate what would be an increase in offsite flows. So there's 2 basins. Basin 1 and basin 2 detention basins, and then basins 3 and basins 4 are proposed infiltration basins. So we will be able to infiltrate and account for some attenuation at these basins, whereas basins 2 and basins 1, we saw as part of the test pit investigation, we saw really high seasonal high groundwater. So we can't account for any infiltration, and those are just detention basins, basically meaning that we're not accounting for anything infiltrating into the ground. We have to manage it all within the basins, and then with outlet control structures and spillways, the flow will be managed, and runoff will go off-site. So as part of the basins, and just to try to capture more water versus it just directly going off-site, as Peter mentioned, there are some drainage swales associated with the basins. Basin 1P has a drainage swale discharging into the basin, as well as basin 3P over on the east side of the site. So stormwater will flow into these basins, and then to get a little bit into the technicals, we have the stormwater modeling system called HydroFlow that we use. or HydroCAD that we use, to input all of the parameters, the sizing of the basins, where the spillways are located, elevations. And then we use NOAA rainfall data, and different storm events to kind of analyze what the water flowing offsite is going to be. So associated with each basin, you'll have a spillway that is at an elevation higher than your basin bottom. So water will fill up into the basin and then flow through either these spillways or the outlet control structures. And that's how it will mitigate offsite. And that's kind of the same setup for all four basins. And then if I can just turn to the detailed page real quick and kind of show you a cross section view of what goes into the basins. Detail 8 on C502, if you look the plans up online, kind of shows a typical cross section of what the basin bottom will look like, how the outlet control structure sits inside the bottom of the basin, and then it discharges through the berm of the basin, and then the different details for where the riprap apron will be at the spillway, what the spillway construction will be, as well as on the outside of the basin, the flared end section that will be at the base of the outlet control structure pipe that discharges water as well. And I know a lot of that is really technical, and I'm happy to go into more detail or ask specific questions if any of the public has any, and board members have any. So at high level, that's kind of all of the information associated with the stormwater design.
Yeah, so here's my questions. You've got an overflow discharge, and you've got a full discharge that is lower than the overflow. So the overflow basically is for when basin fills up over wall. And what happens when we exceed the capacity of the basin? And that sheet flow starts to flow, you're gonna go, it's going off property at that point, correct?
Right, yes, but that's always the intent, kind of what we look at in the design, under pre-development conditions, there's water flowing off-site. So we try to mimic that with the post-development design and try to keep those flows of what's discharging off-site at those locations to a lesser value. So your question was what happens when the basin fills up and there's no more capacity? The basin designs that we do have, the basin designs that we do have, there's what's called a freeboard, and that's just free space between like what your highest water elevation will be. And we designed for, like you said, the 100-year storm. So from the 100-year storm, what the water elevation is to the top of the berm, which would be the full capacity of the basin, we always leave 1 foot of freeboard, which means there's 1 foot of clearance space between what your water elevation is and the top of the basin. So your water, in theory, will never go over the top of your berm. It will always be discharged either through your outlet control structures or your spillways.
And those outlet structures and spillways are going into a current drainage course based on the topography.
Correct, yeah.
So can we go back to the big picture and sort of explain how that flow in each area has worked? Where it's taken, just so people understand. So you've got one area that's right to the left, right?
Yeah, so they're described as POAs, points of analyses. So point of analysis 1 is the wetland series at the southwest corner of the parcel. It's identified as wetland series 7. So kind of all your flow and all your topography, there's a low point in that corner, and that's why there's a wetland there. So basin 1P, and that's where we're trying to focus that spillway and the discharge is just a gradient of the wetland and the associated buffer, and then just based on natural flow paths and topography will flow down into that area.
What about the others?
So basin 2P is just north of a second wetland series identified as wetland series 6, and similar operation. Is going to discharge from your basin, either out your outlet control structure or over your spillway and go to that low spot, which is that wetland 6 series. Let's keep going.
Yeah, why don't you just go around?
So then, basin 3P, which is on the east side of the development, the property line, extends all the way over to kind of the Plainfield Ashfield line. But between where the development line is, there's a wetland series, wetland 4. There's another larger wetland, wetland 1, and I believe there's a perennial stream. There's a perennial stream within wetland 1 series as well. So basin 3P is up gradient of all of those series and associated buffers in the riverfront area. So from the basin, it discharges within the meadow area of the limits of work, kind of will naturally flow into those series.
Very well.
And then the very one at the top, same thing, is within that same point of analysis. Point POA 3, where those wetland series are, it's just further north than basin 3.
So in general, the topography is, if I understand it right, is flowing from north to south. There's the general gradient of land.
It flows in different directions. This, I would say, between kind of right in the middle of the property, to the west, it's going north to south, and then on the east side, it's going. Yeah.
Thank you. So, one of the things that we haven't seen yet, is decommissioning. And we typically require a bond to cover the cost of decommissioning. And in order to assess what the cost of decommissioning, we need to know what we're committing. I'm struggling with trying to come up with a way to ascertain what would be required for decommissioning if we don't know exactly the equipment that we're going to use. We know the types of equipment we're going to use. We know probably what the capacity is. But we don't know, for example, the size of the pads because the equipment is correct. So there's some flexibility, I think, in the design at this point, is what you're saying.
I'd say the equipment pad area is pretty well defined as it is. The final equipment selection, like you mentioned, is subject to change based on what the product availability is going to be at the time of construction. To just go back to your initial question about how the decommissioning estimate is developed, what we look at is we kind of look at construction in reverse. In the future, when the system were to be dismantled, we kind of do a reverse estimate. We look at what the labor cost would be to pull all of the panels up, to remove all the wiring, to pull all the posts up, to regrade the site, to take out all the equipment, like you mentioned, pull up all the gravel, and we kind of itemize it in different groups. There's about 10 different groups that we look at, pull all the fencing out, and we come up with a cost estimate at current value. So we would assume we would be doing that work today. And then we apply an average inflation rate, and look at it compounding over a 20-year period. That's the typical life cycle that we look at in terms of decommissioning estimate. And then that year 20 value is what typically is used to apply a bond for the project. In terms of actual equipment, in my opinion, whether it's one battery vendor or another, the cost to remove those batteries is similar. So it doesn't, I would say in terms of a decommissioning estimate, to me, it's not really important what the actual equipment is, but just general sizing of what's proposed. Do you have it?
There's somewhere in here that it tells us the number of inverters and batteries and all that.
Yeah, there's a one-line diagram. I apologize, I don't know the appendix offhand, but there is a one-line diagram in your initial application that kind of goes through all that. And I did, it is all included also in the sound calculations that were provided in that supplemental package. So I can just tell you the proposed inverters that are on that one line, there's 30 inverters. They're going to be centrally located at the equipment pad. sometimes you can hear things called string inverters, and those would be located within the rows of the actual array, but these are proposed to be centrally located at the pad. There's approximately 30 inverters. There was 2 transformers included on the one line and 2 battery storage containers.
What is the capacity of the battery storage?
Yeah, usually notice, I haven't checked the spec. So it's two 1750 kilowatt hour batteries. Which for scales like likely 2 shipping containers, we may be able to do that in one, depending on, like I said, the vendor chosen. But it shouldn't be greater than that.
Our biggest concern, I think, probably is the battery storage. And of all the battery storage fires that have failed, it's the ones that are the larger containers that are buying in one central location as opposed to the smaller units that are somewhat together. And I think the proposed actually was a system that was a smaller 4-foot by 8-foot box and your guess is 2 of them, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So we're gonna need to know exactly what those are for us to be able to feel comfortable about the potential impact. So you could either commit to the size of the units and the number of units and then have ability to change manufacturers, but we want to know what the configuration is, so we have if we have it all in one container, for example, then if there is an incident, then we have a much larger payment issue for the fire than or multiple containers, for example, that have the dwell listing that protects them from each other. So from our perspective, as a small town, the best way to manage risk is to not have it, all contain one dense location.
Judy is asking that you use the mic.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. So I'm talking about the best storage, and I think that what we have learned in our research is that it's much better for us to have, if we're gonna have best, have it be in a smaller container, multiple units rather than one large container, so that if there is an incident, it can be contained and it doesn't become a longer duration time. So I think we're gonna want ultimately what those are. What else do I have here? On the maintenance plan, typically you want to see a report filed with the town at the annual plan that includes an incident report so that we have a handle on understanding that people have been there, know if there's anything that's come up. Because part of understanding the risk is to also understand what's been going on. So it's kind of like staying in touch with us through the integration. And so we want to add that to the maintenance plan. What else do I have here in my notes? I'm not sure the screening is adequate from East Street because when you add the retention basin and you clear the road, it's gonna be quite open. So I'm not comfortable with it being adequately screened from the roof. And one of our objectives is try to not have these arrays when they arrive be something that becomes a prominent feature. Even though the road isn't frequently traveled, we'd want to see some screening, maybe a meander in the road, so we can talk about how we might mitigate the visual impact there. What else do I have? And then you mentioned a lift truck. We don't currently have the truck. The fire truck is a smaller vehicle, so I think we can probably reduce the amount of access road required and also provide a turnaround to sort of mitigate some of that impervious surface. And then wherever we do have beds, we want to have at least 20 feet surrounding the beds area that is non-combustible so that we can isolate it. So those are my comments.
Okay, just a few, I want to make sure we leave enough time for the butters and everybody who's at the meeting. In the high level first of the application, you have listed that there's going to be no lighting. Like, there is going to be some lighting, so is it spec'd out anywhere?
Which lighting are you describing?
Well, previously on another plan that we had, there were some issues with the lights and the lights that they had chosen for the design in terms of how they would be impacting. So there is light, okay, I come in to inspect the facility, there is lighting. So you're saying there's no lighting, so I'm gonna come at night, there's a fire, there's no lighting at the facility?
Right now, it would just be, if you arrive there in the evening, it would be the headlights to your car, you wouldn't have you don't have any lighting proposed to try to mitigate any lighting to the surrounding area in the evening. That's the.
I don't know. No lighting sounds interesting, or?
See, you have to service that they bring service lights to.
What did they bring?
So the microphone, they're still having a hard time.
Okay.
You have to
That's.
pass the microphone back and forth.
We can add this, I don't wanna go into like a 10-minute discussion on lighting, but I do think we need to follow up on. No lighting just seemed a little odd to me. My second question is around the utility connections. So in the proposal, it says that all the utility connections will be above ground. In our bylaws, the request is, if possible, they are not above ground. Why is it not possible for them to be below ground?
So Marco, you might be able to answer this a little bit better than me, but as part of the interconnection agreement with the utility, their poles are required to be above ground for the service equipment that has to be associated with them. So, from within the site, on the DC side for all of the array, everything will be underground going to the equipment pad. And then from the equipment pad to the first pole on the other side of the access road will be underground. But, based on my understanding of how the interconnection agreement is, all of those poles are required just to comply with the utility.
The high level project overview just says they're not gonna be below ground. So just for clarification, that's kind of where that question came from. Have you already reached out to the Conservation Commission, even though it says on your checkbox that it doesn't impact? Obviously, if you're putting in drainage that is gonna potentially go into the wetlands, it does impact, even if you're not digging up the wetlands.
Yeah, so we, because we're outside of the jurisdictional areas and the associated buffer zones, we don't trigger the need for a notice of intent application, but yes, we do have a RDA application. We've been coordinating with the Conservation Commission in terms of submittal deadlines, and our plan is to submit for attendance at the next hearing.
Judy Cole has a question about whether or not you're gonna be in touch with the Board of Health as well.
Are you gonna be in touch with the Board of Health?
So just reading through, we're happy to reach out if we need to directly, but reading through the special permit procedures in the bylaws, it's our understanding that the planning board will reach out to the board to share a copy of the application. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had.
All right, I have a few questions on the operations and maintenance agreement that was included in the proposal. The first is that there is a quarterly full site visual inspection. Years 1 through 10, it's only annual. Years 11 through 20, is there a reason for that?
No particular reason for that, so that, if there's a comment on there, that could be revisited. But typically the maintenance and the inspections are done quarterly, as you referenced. And, you know, if it's at the board's discretion to have that amended, to have additional visits from years 10 on, we could accommodate that.
Thanks.
And then another, just to add, the best fire safety system, it says it's only, inspected annually. I think that is another one that doesn't seem sufficient.
Yeah, related to the batteries, we've been doing this with a lot of communities. We've been working with different, expert groups, and I think this would be relative to the chair's question too. That we're looking to put together, emergency response plans and an operations maintenance plan specifically for the battery storage system. To address the, typical concerns related to that. So I think as we proceed, we can provide more information on that. And then similar to that would be like a hazard mitigation plan. Those are the typical 3 items I'd say that we're expanding on related to the batteries as we get more information from the vendors that we're using, and then there's more information from the experts in the field dealing with these. We can incorporate that, provide it to the town, and then work better on how the fire department would address issues, and then have more visibility into, operation and maintenance. So
And then, can you add snow removal to your plan as well? Can you add snow removal to your plan as well? Because there was not anything mentioned in the maintenance plan about snow removal, especially for the access road.
yes.
And then just, some of the other questions have already been answered, but one thing that I just found interesting, and I want to know if you could follow up on it from the geotechnical engineering data report. There was some comments about frost depth and, the impact that frost depth could potentially have on the sustainability of the panels. And according to the data that was in the report that you provided, that basically shallower than 10 feet is a concern, and the report said it's 4 feet at this location. So can you just talk to that a little bit?
I can't specifically talk to that. I'm not an expert in that field, but I would be happy to take back your questions to the geotech engineer and provide some follow-up for you.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna pass to Jude, just so I just wanna make sure that I understand that.
Okay, yes, I think it's really important to hear from the abutters because, I just want to speak for myself. I'm very interested in changing our bylaws in this area. We cannot do that in time for this project. And so what we can do is, be as vigilant as possible in the details, going forward. And so as much information as we can get from abutters about concerns, the better we would be equipped to address those concerns. I have a question. Do you have you successfully decommissioned a project?
So the projects that Blue has installed and developed, to my knowledge, there hasn't been one decommissioned yet. So, what we've dealt with is the bonding similar to that and the plans for the future, but the projects have all been, installed since 2011. Not been decommissioned to my knowledge, either developed or the projects that have been constructed are currently under the book that we own.
I said one more thing. One note that I did follow up on is in the array description. It talked about a snow load of 30 pounds per square foot. Well, we're in a 60 pound per square foot snow load zone. So, and it says that the manufacturer can modify the design to meet different snow loading conditions. So we would expect documentation that the whatever panels and support system is provided will meet the current snow loading requirements there. And I'm sure that has to do with the tracking mechanism and its ability to move the panels. That's why there's snow. I'm gonna want to still rotate. I imagine the tracker doesn't. Tracker still senses the movement, right?
Yeah,
Just say one thing with that. Just for information, because it's really beneficial to have more information. So the trackers are actually unique in that they shed the snow. So, you know, you can have a big snow event like we all saw last week, and they're all tested for, you know, wind as well as snow load. So the fracking vendors we will procure from will have tested that, and we want to buy a product that's gonna resist that, of course. So that's our, you know, prerogative to make that be tested and provide that information to you. But from a mechanism standpoint, between the fixed tilt type of design that stays in one place in one tilt position throughout the year, the trackers actually are able to shed the snow and reduce the weight because they can move.
You have one more. Well, I guess two-parter. Have you ever not gotten the successful, the SMART program? Have you ever been rejected? Is this a sure thing?
I mean, we design the systems to comply with the standards that they have. So, you know, the projects have to be designed in a way to meet the regulation. And when we do that, we'll be successful to it. So I haven't had a project that hasn't, because we proceed with it, to put it that way. So you have to, as long as it complies, we proceed.
So just, further got
Are there any limits on tree removal in the SMART program?
They have released sequestration related figures and mapping, so we're reviewing that across all the projects we have. That's still been coming out recently, so every single project that I have is being reviewed to see how the mapping. And if they finalize the mapping and what we're gonna be using, if it matches that, so we're still doing that with all the projects we have.
And so lastly, we hope, I mean, yes, that's important to us, this ecosystem, well. Yes, we want to know how town is going to be affected, and that includes, the removal of trees. And it includes how, can you just speak to who is benefiting from this? Is it our town? Is our town benefiting from this project?
Yeah, so in terms of the, you know, the benefits, of course, from a state perspective, we're contributing towards the goals for 2050 to reduce, you know, carbon emissions. That's why they have the SMART program. That's what these projects are about across the state, carports to new fields and even these types of projects. And they've given those guidelines related to what you're asking about, sequestration and other conservation related elements to try to mitigate it in certain areas. So that's kind of like how the design of the system from the state. And where the benefit on the state side is towards renewable energy. On the local side, you know, this project would, at least for East Street, it would upgrade that line to a 3-phase, which currently is not, so that the project would fund that through Eversource, who would do the work. And then these projects, you know, typically like to propose a pilot agreement for the property tax. Property tax is the actual equipment that sits above the land, so don't think about it as real estate, think about it like panels, the inverters, the transformers, they all have a taxable value that they will be assessed with the assessor that we look to have a fixed agreement to pay on an annual basis to the town. And then related on an individual basis, these projects are eligible for individuals to get subscriptions to get discounts on their bill, and there's different subscribers that you can work with the utility in order to enroll on the benefit discount. They call that community solar. Thank you.
Right. So I'm gonna open it up to the abutters and then we'll go to the general public. And I just want to remind everybody that the question should be specific to this project. We've had wonderful community discussions about solar in general, but for the purposes of the public hearing, we should keep our questions related to the project.
Okay.
What?
Hi, my name is Kathy Shaw. I'm the land abutter to the southern side. I know on the meeting before the planning board meeting last month, that Blue Wave, put on. Other than the Barbanti household, my house is the closest property, closest to the perimeter of the property that's involved. I do have major concerns about the best storage unit. I also have concerns about the runoff itself as well. In my capacity as a crop consultant, I had worked with a number of farmers that had done projects through Blue Wave. And the actual panels themselves, I don't have any major concerns with, but I certainly do the storage unit.
Hi, my name's Brian. Butter that south that you own great property. I was questioning about, we're talking about the wetlands that were out there. When was the last time it was actually delineated project?
I just have to see if it's referenced, in this material. I don't know the date offhand. So the delineation was performed in October of 2023.
With that being said, I think,
You have to hold it like a, of course.
with that being said, I think that they're only good for 3 years before it has to get rechecked. If I'm not correct.
An ANRAD delineation, when you go and you certify your wetlands through an ANRAD report, yes, those ANRAD delineations are good for a total of 3 years.
Just classified as one of them.
Well, technically, we're still within the window, October of 2023, we'd have until October of 2026.
I'm not in a butter, so. I mean, I have two questions. One is, we have another project before us, and you will have to submit through the planning board, but we're gonna need those. I'm on the Conservation Commission, and you will need to speak to us and to the Board of Health, because we all have to weigh in on the safety of the community. You understand that, correct? You can just shake your head, it's okay.
I would like to talk to Peter. I'm not fully aware of what the process is with the Board of Health. It wasn't clear.
Well, you can discuss that, but just so you know, the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission will weigh in on this as per the planning board's conditions, because that's how they usually lay out these special permits. And therefore, because we all have a stake, safety of the community. And even though the wetlands that you pointed out are not within your fenced-in area or your clear cutting, they will be affected by the runoff and the basins, and that's why we would have to check all of that, besides whatever the Board of Health has to do. I do have a question, because you mentioned, I heard at the presentation that you guys did, you mentioned this community solar, but does that really have to do with your project, or could I do that anytime?
You could do it currently, and enroll into projects, and then this project, we plan if it makes sense to pursue that through DOER, we would plan to enroll it to be eligible in that mix of other projects that you could enroll to.
Can you just explain that a little further? Because my understanding with community solar is it depends on my income and then I could apply. So how would having this solar farm installed benefit any of us to get that abatement on our, or reduction on our electric bills?
Yeah, I'd have to review again the eligibility. So you're correct, there's eligibility criteria that they have for the target populations that they're looking to make it eligible. But I understand that folks who do live in Plainfield could be eligible for that.
But that doesn't really have to do with your solar farm. It's not because you're installing the solar farm, am I eligible? I feel like we're being sold a little bit on this, because my understanding is that it's not connected to your project particularly.
I disagree. I think if you have
I don't understand. So
you have no projects then to that program, we're one of the projects that would be involved in that program, which makes us, makes a individual in this town, and I'm describing one way that you benefit, able, if you meet that criteria, to be able to enter. And I can come more prepared for that criteria for the next meeting. I don't have it up top. But that would, I think I answer your question, that folks would be eligible to do that. I think it's a misrepresentation to describe that it's an upsell. I think that this is an appropriate pathway that the state's carved out, that DOER has described for individuals in communities to benefit directly from these projects through discounts on their bill.
So we get.
I'll give you the mic. So
It's okay,
people-
I'm really good at projecting. And so you put in the farm, let's say, and you tell the state, we've done this. So anybody in town could apply. Does it go through you, or do we just mention your name, or do you know how it works specifically?
Betsy, I just tried to do it online while this meeting was happening. And it gets to the point where you enter your residence and your address and your town and your utility, and then it asks you to see your electricity bill, which I think is the criteria that you're probably referring to. And I don't know how it worked beyond that, because I stopped at that point. I wasn't going to go get a utility bill and scan it and do it. I was more interested in this, but I had two other things I wanted to say. One was that I believe the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission come into the equation not through the planning board, but when you get to applying for the building permit phase. I believe the building commissioner will check with the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health about whether or not they have seen this project and have any opinion. And I encourage anyone on the planning board to correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not the most expert on this, but that was how it seemed to work in a previous special permit we were considering. The only other thing I wanted to say was with respect to what Betsy was pushing on about what does the town get? Yes, there may be benefits for the state. Well, there certainly are benefits for the state. There certainly are benefits for the property holder. There may be benefits for individual residents. What does the town of Plainfield get out of this? And pilot, I think, is your only answer. And I have questions about that.
So. Yes. When board deliberates and then on the project, whether we deny it, move it with conditions. And we typically include in those conditions, I think or the Conservation Commission, because they are required to sign off when the permit is applied. So, that's the checkpoint. For compliance. And we conclude that in the application process, send a copy to them so that if they have specific comments during the planning board's process, they can convey those to us at that time. Any other questions? Yes. No, just thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Roxy. I'm not a direct abutter, but we live, our property is right up the road on Alden Lane. I had a question about the ambient noise readings and when they were taken, what time of day, what time of year. And I am concerned about the vegetation. Vegetation coverage is very different in the middle of summer and the middle of winter. And noise levels are heard very differently in the middle of the day and in the middle of the night. So we're concerned about how the noise is going to travel through trees with no leaves on them and how it's going to travel at night when it's a lot quieter.
Thank you for your question. So the sound readings that we did to collect ambient were just done a few weeks ago in January. They were done towards the later half of the day. We took two different readings at two different times. The first set of readings was done around 1:30 in the afternoon, and the second set of readings was done between 4 and 4:30 in the afternoon.
I also want to address the sound level issue. It's interesting that you discussed what the sound levels will be when the BESS is operating. How many battery manufacturers are there in the United States that could provide that, possibly provide a battery for this project?
I don't know how many there are, I can't speak to
I
how
can't,
many.
I looked it up, but that's not the point. The point is,
Right now, we've been working with, two really core vendors. One's the one we submitted for this, as a specification, that's Goshen is the company. And then there's another company we've been using, it's actually Canadian, that sells a battery called E-Storage. Those are the two vendors that we've been working through. We've gone through the engineering diligence with them. But depending on what's available, typically is why it's difficult today to tell you exactly what it would be. But those are typically the two groups who narrow down the list a bit.
when they run, or any particular battery from any particular company, when they run, do they all run to the same spec? Across the board?
No, the ones that we're looking at, which I call almost like a commercial industrial level, not, some of the, storage only sites that are really, really large. So these battery packs are usually up to about 5,000 kilowatt hours. They don't always have the same cell configuration, so the sizing can vary slightly. That's why I was mentioning earlier, if it's two separate containers or one container, depending on what we're looking at for the size, they have different configurations. Now, the setup, they have to comply with the National Fire, the NFPA, and then the NEC. And then we always will try to procure something that's UL certified too. So those three categories of consumer protection is something we want to procure. Also, of course, we want to make sure that what's selected is in the best interest of the locality and the town. So all of those steps are done, and then like I mentioned before, typically as a condition of if we were to proceed. We would move forward with hazard mitigation plans and ERPs, emergency response plans, that work with an expert that works with that vendor to put together everything, and then bundle that up and work with the fire department and with their input to make sure the plans and the equipment's reviewed and understood as you go through into operation. It wouldn't be like we go from today and then we're constructing. There's a whole bunch of work through the electrical permit, the design work that we go through to ensure that the quality of what we have is gonna work and be safe.
So aside from the baseline danger of having one of these units to begin with, you're saying that there's gonna be mitigation for any possible problems per each company according to the UL rules and all the criteria that's been set by the government, et cetera?
I would phrase it as we do all that work for the operation to make sure it's gonna operate effectively. And we put those plans together in case of those events. But which are extremely rare, you know, if you do look at the references, there's many of these being put out into the environment in all different areas, and we know of a few different instances where it was unexpected. And something that, God forbid, happens, but you wanna be prepared, and then we wanna work with the town, the departments to make sure that we have plans in place.
One last point, which is my first point, which is if they have all these variations and all these companies and the way these batteries operate, how are we gonna be reassured that the decibel level and the irritation to the people living nearby is not going to happen? We don't know until you select the battery from the particular company, and then we know what specification that particular unit has in terms of zones and decibel output. So we're not gonna know until this thing is actually on the pad and running.
Did you wanna say something? Did you say something?
So typically, the DEP requires a maximum increase in sound of 10 dB over ambient. And so, and there has to be a pre-construction and post-construction verification. So that it's not just designed, it has to actually be tested.
Oh, okay, that's great. Does that happen in situ or in the lab, in their?
No, it's actually tested in the field.
Oh, so if there are corrections that need to be made, will be made then and there
Correct.
for attenuation, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, members of Pleasant Street. I want to push a little bit more on the sound question. Because we keep talking about daytime and it's I believe, or at least I think. That these units will run day and night. Is that correct? You can just say yes or no. They go on the battery units.
Typically, they run less actually because they're benefiting from the solar.
Okay, so they run less at night.
But they may still have noise levels due to, like, if it's cold or hot outside. to
Right,
regulate temperature.
Right,
So,
so in any case, it seems to me then that it would be very necessary to take ambient noise tests. Also during the night, because if you can't go more than 10 decibels over the ambient noise, then it's at night that's going to be even more of an issue than during the day, because during the day people are awake and at night they're trying to sleep. So it seems to me that that's really incumbent on you. I don't know what the law says or the regulation may not be clear, but I would prevail upon the planning board to require such testing be done in advance so that the testing afterwards can have something to test against. Thank you.
I have a question about the tracking panels you have there. Is this something you've been doing routinely, the tracking panels?
yes,
And you have some experience with it, and they're pretty reliable?
yes, I think every project for the last 3 years, 4 years that I've installed has been trackers.
Yeah, it's a much better idea, much better design. And also I understand from reading the specs that not only do they sort of absorb photons from the upper surface, but they also from the downside, the other side of it as well at the same time.
They can, that's, you know, depending on the panel, if now they have bifacial panels, so bifacial panels will pick up our readings that comes from the ground as well on the back pad.
Got it, thank you.
I don't know.
What do you have to do?
I don't know.
Page 82 North Union Street. Following up on the sound issues, testing at the North Union Street project, which is a much busier street, busier area, found a 19 decibel level, and then I guess the Mass DEP broadband limit was 29. I'm curious about how often these these panels track for how long and how loud they are when they do that tracking, and whether that was also accounted for in the noise study. And I'd also like to know if you're going to be adding on batteries as they degrade over the project's lifespan, and whether that can also increase the noise level.
Everything included in the noise study was associated with the equipment pad, not the trackers itself.
I can speak to it from, I can speak to that from personal experience at least. They move very sudden degrees throughout the day. So you can think of how slow the sun really moves. They just move a slight degree. And if all you hear in that moment is more like if you're right next to it, you might hear just like the tick of the motor, and then it sets. It's very, very slight, and it's a short period of time, and then it stays that way for 15 to 20 minutes, and then we have that again. We didn't include those, but if we did do an analysis, we could take. I have had experience in the past of a similar thing where we'd taken the level from those and then included it for the distance, but it's compared to the batteries and inverters, it's just from personal experience, it's significantly less.
And does the whole field move at the same time, or is this potentially staggered throughout?
The question was, does the whole field move at the same time? They're usually in different block, like think about the different rows have different torque tube sections where they're kind of all tied together. Usually it will all move, basically you'll see the whole array move at once. But you could have, like, if they're in some individual sections based on where they are, they might slightly move off, but typically they do move all at once, because they're in rows, and we're using more of that type of system from the Racker that would do it that way. Here you go.
Hey, I'm Ed Stockman from Summer Street. Let's stay on the theme of sound. What you said that it had 30 decibels of ambient. What was making that 30 decibels?
So during the sound readings, when they were occurring, there was some wind blowing, so it's the whistling of the trees. At one point, there was a car that drove by down the street that picked up some noise. So those that's just your ambient noise of what goes into a background reading. Those were some of the things that were noted during readings when they were collected on that day.
You said that you were gonna clear 26 acres, is that true?
I think it's 23.
23? Okay. Tell me about the clearing, what percentage of that 23 acres is forested?
So we did do a forest assessment that's included in the supplemental package that I handed to the planning board tonight. And overall, the assessment was that the conditions were the forest was in a fair condition. It's made of a mix of deciduous and coniferous trees. There was notes that this site was previously logged, and there was some like regrowth from the logging. So in general, I'm not an arborist or a forester. I can't go into details of that, but there was an assessment and it can be made available to you to review.
What percentage was forested?
I don't have that number offhand. I can just say that 23 acres is going to be cleared. So the total limit of work is just over 26 acres, and the clearing aspect of it is just over 23.
So is it all forested?
There's small portions that are existing field areas.
Yeah, that's what I mean, I don't know.
Oh, a majority of it is cleared area.
That means 51%?
Over 50% is going to be clear, is cleared.
It's cleared area.
Is currently wooded.
51% is forested.
I don't have the exact percentage, but it's over 50%.
We'll get back to
Yes, yeah.
Also, I just want to ask one more question. Are you planning to phase this project in its construction stages?
No, the typical construction for these is like 6 to 8 months. Here, of course, we'd have to do clearing, stumping, grubbing, and then we'd move on with the road, and then typically once the road's in, you have the laydown area, they'll come in and deliver the racking equipment. And then from there, they'll get the modules in, they'll bring the transformers and inverters, build up the pad, and then everything will kind of get installed in parallel at that point, once everything's delivered. That usually, all of that would usually take 6 to 8 months in one phase.
I hope that the planning board takes a look at the phasing of this and see if it's going or not. Typically, developers don't want to phase because it's more complicated and a little more expensive for them, but it, from an environmental perspective, is generally a very good thing to do.
I think one of the items, I don't know if it was listed in here, I think for the phasing, in terms of what you're phasing, I think we're talking about two different kinds of phasing. You know what I mean? I think that you're really
about construction phasing.
Yeah, and so really thinking about stabilization as you start to do this clearing of the land, not just like one fell swoop, but clearing some of the land, stabilizing the land, then going to another piece of the cleaning. So I just wanted to make sure that the question was more about phasing the clearing and the stabilization before you bring in the equipment. I don't know if that was more of your question as opposed to, yes, obviously, you're gonna bring in the pieces of equipment when the land is ready, but how do you do the phasing of the construction when it comes to the land, the clearing, and the stabilization of that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, so in terms of the phasing associated with just establishing construction conditions of the site. Typically what we do is first you go in, you have your contractor install all your perimeter EMS controls at the site. It would be silt fence around the entire perimeter. And then you would do the least amount of clearing possible to get to where your temporary VMPs are going to be located. At the 4 proposed stormwater basin locations that we have on the plans under construction conditions, those would be temporary sediment traps. And there's a separate detail of what the construction of that has to be. So your contractor would go in and just clear the minimum amount of land along the perimeter to get down to each of the locations of where your 4 VMPs, your 4 sediment trap locations would be. They would clear, stump those locations, grade out those basins, get those sized. And then after those basins are in, then you would do the rest of the site clearing. You would come in, you would clear the trees, and then you would grub and stump in those locations. And then following grubbing and stumping, then there's intermediate slope protection that would be installed, and that could either be using like a straw wattle, or because of the tree clearing, we can just grind the trees on site and use mulch berms from the trees. And that would be installed along, like parallel to your ground contours at different increments within your site, to promote or provide intermediate slope protection for temporary stabilization. And then you kind of go through with your typical construction that Marco outlined with, you bring in your racking installer, you drive your post, and then go through with the rest of your construction. And then at the end of that, then you'd pull your temporary stabilization, you'd start to seed your site, you'd leave your temporary sediment traps in place. You'd start to seed and stabilize your site, and once your site's stabilized, then you'd go in and you'd finalize the basin construction to what it should be under a permanent condition.
Does the board have that narrative you just gave us?
There should be, not in that level of detail, but kind of summarized in a list on the notes. It's either on G002 or on C001. There is a sequencing.
Michael, Second Street. You were talking about the emergency plans, God forbid something happens. Can you talk more about what's in those? Like if there's a fire or something like that, and who gets them? Yeah.
Yeah, I have one with me today that, I was reading through, because we've been working with a group, putting these together in draft form, that's basically like, once you get the equipment, you'd be able to fill it out more completely, but it goes through all the different elements of the system itself, and how the system would have mitigations, related to different events, you know, like overheating. If there's fire, all the different elements that it would have in the suppression that would be included, so it has like a detailed schematics in the beginning. Then the second part goes into the reaction in the event that it happens to the surrounding area. I'm basically summarizing it, but then it'll have descriptions of, what would a fire department need to do for containment, what mechanisms would they use? So it has section by section. It's something I could provide. Right, soon, because we've just been working on this recently, so by the time we submit it, the supplement today, but it would be something we could provide for the planning board's review.
So then, so the fire department receives those plans, and then they file them away somewhere and.
Oh, go ahead, I don't know.
Well, no, go, yeah, that's fine.
Well, related to that, I think the fire department would be able to, through the special permit process, be able to comment on what we would provide and then talk to them. So they should be able to review it and we'd be able to meet and discuss it.
Okay, great, I'm almost there.
Go ahead.
So, then we've got how many different solar installations is there?
Right.
And then each one has a different plan. It sounds like I'll talk about this before, but at some point, the fire department has a lot of things that they need to keep in mind for each different installation. Each one has different specs, and it's a volunteer department. So I'm sorry, we went away from talking about this project in particular, but it's cumulative. So it's just.
Right.
Is that,
I,
yeah, okay.
may I,
With questions.
I think, in the room, in our last project, the fire chief was here, and I believe he even used this language that we would run out of personnel before we would run out of water. So we have concerns as a town. And I wanted to ask a question, just broad level up here. We are one zone. It's rural agricultural. It's not industrial. We do not have an industrial zone. We have a volunteer fire department. We are not assured of water. That has to be looked at too. And this is, people are going to live around it. So we will be looking at it as carefully as we can, but I guess my question to you would be, looking at our bylaws, and when you first read that we have no industrial zone, and you've even used language tonight that, when you describe the batteries, I believe you use the word industrial even, or commercial, the way you describe the batteries. So I'm very uncomfortable with batteries. You knew that from the last meeting. And so, I just don't understand how, unless we have more hefty bylaws around batteries, they're not even mentioned in our bylaws, how you could have filled out the application, even when you look at it, and how we can evaluate it. This is,
Yeah, no, I just wanna, as we're getting on the specific battery issue, in this particular project, unlike maybe other projects here, it's an ancillary use, right? So it's important to remember that the real project we're proposing is a solar project with a battery to clip off or reduce the fossil fuel use around the state. This would contribute to that in the evenings, because it captures the energy during the day. That's how it operates, and then in the evenings it'll dispatch. So I just wanna, bring it whole, that the whole site here is not batteries. There's an ancillary battery, probably 2 containers, and I understand the concern. And I think that I'm not able to answer that, in terms of a cumulative view, but I'd like to be able to work, with the planning board, and the things I've described here, obviously I won't get through the compliance standards, but we're trying to work as best as we can to give assurance on what we'd be able to provide through the different groups, to understand what's being provided, what would be installed at the time it would be, and it's difficult not to be able to provide that today, the actual battery, but in the future, prior to construction, if it was in any condition, that would be necessary, and that would be, something we want to do, go through the actual specs, go through the electrical permit and make sure it's a safe use, that is what we wanna do, we wanna follow through on what we're proposing.
Yeah, so just to be clear, everybody, what's required is by the state, under state law, is for the applicant to work with the fire department to come up with an emergency plan. That is not something they come up with and hand to the fire department, but they work hand in hand with the fire department. And they have to sign off on that plan. So if there is a risk that the fire department is not comfortable with, they have the ability then to say that can't be supported. So that's another checkpoint that we have. So at the point, so what if the chief gets to the point where he feels like he cannot support the rare occurrence of a potential fire, he will say so.
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you.
Hi, good evening. I'm just one of the others, for the property.
Can you hold it closer to your mouth?
Okay, sorry, is this better? So when things go south, things go south. It doesn't matter like how quickly things things will happen quickly. And we'll have plans and everything, sure. But is this company willing to take that on with everyone else? Like our insurance going up because we have batteries, not just solar, because we do have the batteries. What if that happens? What happens with those? What if something goes awry with that? It doesn't matter about the cleanup and everything, it's not gonna be sufficient. Like, what happens with our property? It's so much of a variable, I just don't see the point of it. Like, it's not safe. It really isn't. Like, this company is not gonna take the betterment of a town. It's just not gonna happen. I'm just really baffled by it, like, they're not gonna take on, oh, our insurance went up. Oh, the cost of stuff is still gonna increase and we're not even gonna get a scratch out of it, so, but I guess the question is your company willing to front any costs or anything at our expense if something were to go wrong? Like our insurance or batteries leaking and stuff going wrong with our soil, stuff like that, or anything like that, or water tables flooding people's basements, so now they have to have sub pumps. Are you prepared to like buy that out for people? What's going on with that? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, the project itself carries its own insurance, which we've, in other projects, we've added the town as additional insured, so that's something we've done in the past. But, we're going through the process, we've provided the application. This is the process that we're here to discuss these things, to find, the best project that can be built. So, I understand the concern and we're willing to provide the insurance information there, but I think as we go through, we're willing to take the questions that folks from the public have, from the different departments and from the board, and answer them to continue to provide the best product.
I just have a question about the bath. So on the last project, the last application, the discussion is that the batteries, when they catch fire, just have to be contained. And I don't know if that's true because we didn't have water discussed on the last battery. So that's new to us. But my question about the containment is, you can't box it in and contain it, you have to let air out. And so we get pollution from smoke. Can you just discuss how that might work?
I can. Sure. Elizabeth Lambert, 47 Grand Street. Yeah, it's not just smoke, it's from the stuff inside, it's the electrolytes and the batteries are caustic and very toxic materials, and that's stuff that gets let out.
Airborne.
Yeah, and in the ground.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not an expert in, that field. So it's a very technical question to be fair. The data point I have, I think that, I have it here, related to another site with a similar question. There was a fire, I think it's Escondido, California. And some of the details that came out of that, that's the one that people do research, is actually at following that, there was air readings related to what was in the atmosphere. And it was nothing, to put it in a layman's term, nothing particular about it that was different than a home fire. Just that can happen in a residential area. That's one case, right? And I'm not saying I'm an expert, I'm just referring to answer your question about one study that, I've been able to get following, or one example that's been reportable following a fire. I hope that's at least a helpful
Well,
information.
do I misunderstand the way it works? Can you just, let's say it gets overheated, then you have water in conserved to cool it down. Let's say there's a fire, then what happens? You can't put it out with water, so you contain it, right?
I think the question is, how does the fire suppression system within the BESS system work?
Yeah, it's very technical. Every case is unique. I mean, well, no, to be frank, because every case could be unique and how it would be done. That's why I'm pointing to that it'd be better if you do that with the board going through that plan and making that public. I think better than me going through it today.
That's fair.
In a
A
hypothetical.
follow-up, I think a good, I think some of it is taking the mystery out of it.
Understood. Yeah, and I would rather refer to the expert professionals that I deal with. So thanks for the question.
Yes, one more, a better question, and I'll come back to you.
So is there an evacuation radius that goes along with these fires when they actually catch?
I'll refer to that plan again, I'm talking about related to the emergency response. It mentions, a containment zone in that event, that the fire department would follow and then use. But, that would obviously depend on the scale. So that's why those are particular to projects, right? Because you could have one battery, that would be a different case than a project that has 1,000. So
what's the radius zone of this particular project?
we haven't finalized that plan to submit, so I don't have a plan to refer. But I'm just giving you, that plan would be utilized to provide that, which is something we can provide or look to provide it as a follow-up.
So heaven forbid that happens. And then we fall in the radius of this and there's livestock on the property, are we responsible of removing our own livestock off that property in the expense of our own? Because it's gonna get costly and it's gonna get costly quick.
I don't know if I can answer that question.
I think it's important for the planning board to talk about the livestock if it's abutting the property right there. That's something we have to talk about. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you. We keep talking about fires that come from within the system malfunctioning. What we have not at all addressed is fires coming from without. Because if there's one thing we know, it's that we are going to have more forest fires in the future. And so I would like to make sure that that is part of the conversation. So it's not a direct question to you guys, but it's a note to the planning board that there has to be some, and the question that I want to ask you is, what is done in the packaging or housing of the batteries to keep them from being susceptible to forest fire interference or damage?
Good question.
Sure, I think the best answer is that, these are gonna be, there's gonna be a fence 20 feet around, and then that area is gonna be, away from any forest, area that would be on fire, but that's something we can also include.
I was just gonna say, ask that up in Paradise, California.
Yeah.
A forest fire jumps far further than.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics on the battery designs of mitigating that exact question, so we can also add that as a
Sounds like a
follow-up.
good idea to know.
Yeah. Hi, Brett Patton from South Union Street. Can you speak at all or recommend some information where we can get a sense of the actual risk of one of these BESS systems melting down? As a way to kind of compare that risk to other common energy sources that we're currently reliant on. So like what's the risk of one of these things actually going up?
To provide actual like data risk comparable to something else, that's kind of what you're asking, I'd look to provide that, I don't have a reference to give you an exact figure, because you're asking for like a compare to a house fire, or something like that, I don't have a figure to pull, so I'd have to look that up and provide it to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the research that I've done, the considering all FES that is out there, the current risk is less than 0.3% of potential fire for a BESS unit. If you look at the incidents where there have been fires, most of the fires are on facilities that are much larger than these accessory use BESS facilities, and the risk goes way down to less than 0.1%. So it's as near to zero as one can get without it being zero. But that's just statistics. There's no guarantee. And most of the fires that that have been researched are due to not the BESS system itself failing, but due to either a maintenance issue or a wear and tear or damage or something that is external to the unit, not internal. So the actual battery chemistry is pretty stable, but it's when things go awry, if they're not maintained properly or if there are issues that come up. And that's why the inspections are important and staying on top of that is important.
Interestingly, Union Street, we recently had a coordinator for the clean energy siting and permitting division, at a past meeting. She was talking about how, industrial solar sites can be installed with the BESS component, or, in some cases, the BESS facility is located elsewhere. Would you ever consider installing just a solar facility without the BESS component, especially given the fact that we have enhanced risks here with a volunteer fire department, no municipal water supply? You're basically in the woods with these facilities.
Can you hear me? Question was if we consider not utilizing a battery for the project. The two reasons we're considering it are, one, because, we believe in the benefit of it, of that evening discharge of being able to produce more throughout the day. So that's number one. But the second reason is because this type of project, the DOER has it as a requirement. So they are also pushing the developer, or in this case us, to combine the system with an ancillary storage. So that's kind of the twofold response.
I have just one more question.
Sure.
So if your project isn't approved to be included as part of the SMART program with the incentives, would you still do the project?
I don't understand.
Okay, but so that you might not, if it wasn't, it'd be more of a financial benefit decision in terms of whether you do it.
Everything is such a.
Okay, so the SMART, being included in as a SMART project or being part of that program is a key to the successful implementation of the project.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Do you know how you'll be affected if you apply for the, like, depending on when you apply for the SMART program? Are there, because there's new regulations coming on, right? Yeah, do you have any idea how that would affect you?
The regulations for SMART are already out. Those are different than the citing regulations that are coming out.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Paul, any questions from anybody that's online?
Nope.
All right, well, I think we can close this public hearing.
But can we carry? So if we close the public hearing,
Correct.
the clock is on.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that we're gonna vote on it now.
No, what I was gonna say is that we have time to deliberate after we close the hearing, but if there's no more public input, we can then start our deliberation on the materials we submitted.
But I think we had a lot of questions that they have to come back to us with.
That's
So
correct.
I think the public would have a lot more to say when we have more answers from these guys
Well,
or from you.
correct. Well, I was thinking that we would receive the information that we requested. And when that has been received, then we can make our decision.
But don't we have to have another public hearing so we can receive that information?
I think the other point is that we just got all of this.
Right.
We haven't had a chance to look at that and they haven't had a chance to look at this. So, I mean, that,
So then we can have a continuation.
I think so.
All right. That's why I'm asking.
Thank you.
Continuation.
The public.
hearing.
So then we will adjourn the public hearing and we'll have a continuation. So let's talk about when that will be.
Our next meeting is February, March 4th.
And that was gonna be our working meeting for our bylaw revisions. So that puts us, and when, and you'll be back from that. So we could meet. So the 4th is the first Tuesday,
Wednesday is the 4th.
so it would be the 18th, would be the 2nd, the 3rd rather, the 3rd Wednesday.
Yes.
Does March 18 work for you guys?
I'll be in Florida if I can attend via Zoom. I can join, but I do have conflict. Could we can be
If you're available, I can find a call.
Yeah,
I'm not.
as long as you're okay if I attend via Zoom, I can attend remotely. I am available the 11th.
You want to do the 11th? Okay. So this, we will reconvene this hearing at 7 o'clock on March 11th.
One request that if there are any adjustments that are made, that they happen a little bit before the actual meeting.
Can we plan on a date? Would you
Yeah,
try that? Would they want it? Could it be by the 4th?
The board would be very good fun. Okay.
And then would you have a list that you can send with some questions, just,
I guess-
if there's a No, I'm sure we have.
Yeah, the note from this meeting, that's something we have, I have notes for the place meetings.
Yeah, we all agree.
No, no. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the stuff, and maybe get us
Yeah.
a write-up.
So when would you need that list?
What do you?
Let me just save this date, so I don't forget it. So today's the 11th. We need to get it back to you by the 4th. Probably, if it's reasonable by next Wednesday, like a week to turn that around, the 18th. Yeah, that's reasonable. Okay, thank you.
You can do this on your vacation.
All right, so, we are adjourning this public hearing at 9:50 and, our next. The continuation will be on at 7 o'clock on March 11th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.